been quite a day, and you've probably been here for days, but have only been here since this morning, and I feel unbelievably full. And I wished I had been at all of the presentations, but I was at quite a few, enough to really be deeply, deeply moved, and by the variety of approaches, views, lives that have been shared in a very deep and, feels to me, authentic way. And some of it, of course, I heard but missed, has been absolutely terrifying. And that's probably closer to an accurate diagnosis than all of the happy thoughts. So that's important to just keep in mind, because it means that maybe we can understand the magnitude of our karmic assignments. And I don't think anyone's in the room by accident. If you reflect for a moment, just take a moment and reflect on what brought you here. Why are you really, 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 and I'm not kidding, really, really here? It's probably hard to put into words. But maybe it has something to do with a combination of longing and necessity. Showing up is a major part of living life with integrity. And showing up in our fullness, not leaving half of ourselves at home, or 80% of us at home, rather than showing up at work 100%, or in the family 100%, or in whatever we're doing 100%. And I have a sense that this is a moment in time that's really calling on all of us who care to participate in the love affair as if there were no tomorrow. Because we're capable of having there be no tomorrow, or a tomorrow that you wouldn't want to even be part of. Today is hard enough, okay? And some people are privileged to be more protected than others, but when it comes right down to it, even that's a delusion. And that we're all in this together, and we're going to either, I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, we're either going to hang together when they went into the, sort of write the Declaration of Independence, we're all going to hang together, or we're all going to hang separately. Because the British Empire was no, small thing to fool around with and resist. So I think hanging together in a kind of dharmic way is really, really important. And that means that rather than privileging some person as the embodiment of wisdom or compassion, that it's a distributive function now in humanity, that it's like all of us, to whatever degree possible, and authentically need to embody whatever our inkling, however inadequate it may be, of wisdom and compassion would be. And enact it in real time as a practice. And as Pema Chodron likes to say, all we'll do is fail. And when you fail better the next time. That's called learning. Fail better, fail some more, fail better. Don't give up. And I'm guessing that that's your default mode already, because otherwise, why would you have come to this thing? Some part of you, I'm intuiting, is really coming out of kind of a deep longing to make a difference, or to be a part of something larger that is more a force for good in the world than a force for delusion and separation or othering or blame. Let's see where my microphone is so I can clear my throat if I can. Yep, found the button. Didn't work though. I have a chronic condition that's called life. And sometimes requires me to clear my throat. And it sometimes won't let me. So as I was saying earlier from this stage, the real meditation practice is life itself. And although Yuval Noah Harari kind of emphasizes that what really distinguishes us as a species is that we're capable of telling stories. So we can tell the story of like, hey, if we all got together, we might be able to capture some big animal and feed the tribe for a while. Okay? No other animal's capable of that on planet Earth except us. Actually, sharks do it with schools of fish, I was thinking. So maybe, you know, we're akin to the sharks in a certain way. But the point is that he's saying that what distinguishes us is that we are capable of working together because we can share stories. But if you've been practicing meditation for any period of time, you also know that those stories have a double edge to them, because ultimately, the story's never big enough. And then the personal pronouns become a real problem, especially the singular ones. And I know we have a lot of sensitivities nowadays about pronouns, but from the Dharma perspective, from the wisdom perspective, the problematic ones are I, me, and mine. Okay? And it's not that they're not useful, but they're just placeholders. And so it's really valuable to ask, who am I? And then as our teacher, Sung San Son Sanim, used to say, and he would say it just like this, don't know. You'd ask, what am I? And he'd get a really quizzical look on his face. And then he'd say, don't know. And then he'd say, you keep this don't know mind. Because that's a very big mind. If you were a scientist, every great scientist knows that you got to watch out for your thinking. Because how do you go beyond the horizon of what's known to what's still not known and have the potential to actually discover something that no one's ever seen before? And what you know can actually, you can become a prisoner of it, as Krishnamurti said, you know, we need freedom from the known. So we really have to pay attention to how much our thoughts and our concepts actually valid and beautiful, and our stories, valid and beautiful as they are in some sense limiting our capacity to go beyond the story or to inhabit a much bigger story. And the favorite story, of course, is the story of me, starring me. My suffering, my trauma. And I'm not belittling any of this, but what I'm saying is, for real healing, at a certain point, whenever the developmental arc reaches a certain moment, you realize, okay, I've been here with the story long enough. Now, is there something bigger than this story? Maybe it's another story, but a story for this moment. For this critical moment on planet Earth. And I like to say, and you heard me say it a million times if you were on the mitigation retreat with us back at the first 3 months of the COVID pandemic, that, you know, quoting from Buckminster Fuller, you know, this is an all-hands moment on Spaceship Earth. All hands on deck. And that means you. It means me. That means all of us. no matter how young, no matter how old, and no matter how much the mind says, well, you got a lot more practicing to do before you can contribute, or you're, don't really understand, or, or you're feeling wounded, or othered, or less than. And the Dharmic message, as far as I understand it, of what it means to be human, that goes back way before the Buddha and is not associated with any particular one lineage, is that you're already the Buddha. The nature of your humanity is sentient. We're called sentient beings. And when we learn how to live our way into that, it's embodied wisdom. Right here, right now, not after 30 years of being good or sitting 1 million retreats or anything. Not that you shouldn't be good and sit 1 million retreats or 2 million even. But as I said, when the house is on fire, you also need to contribute to getting everybody out of the house or putting out the fire or whatever's called for. So that's a distributive karmic assignment. It's like all hands on deck. That means you and me. And that we do what it is that we can. And I'm not a big fan of branding a certain thing and saying that's the answer, including MBSR. One of the things about MBSR that I love the most is that I've never tried to control it or tell anybody how to even do it. I just put out the curriculum and you can do it if you have enough, this is a technical Buddhist term, but I'll throw it out, chutzpah. And you'll probably screw it up, especially if you're coming from thought or from fear. But that the people who will be your victims will teach you, if you're patient enough and open enough and compassionate enough, they'll teach you what it's really about. And over the years, you will learn that you're not copying someone else's teaching. You become a vehicle of Dharma yourself. And you can't do that through thinking. So you have to live your way into this moment and then teach out of your understanding of this moment in collaboration with a curriculum that's big enough to make room for you, but also is rigorous enough so that you better follow the curriculum. Or just call it something else, but don't call it MBSR, because that would be, in a sense, a form of violence. So when we name things inappropriately, it's kind of like dangerous. So the stakes are very, very high, and I use MBSR just as like one little tiny example. I'm not into, and what I was trying to say is that I've personally let MBSR just be what it is, and I've tried to articulate what I feel it is and how it should be, and tried to live that in my teaching. But I don't go around policing the waterfront or telling other people what to do, because I feel like, the world will take care of that really fast. If you're like living in delusion, you're going to get slapped on the side of the face soon enough by your own delusion and what comes back at you. So I don't need to control that. That gives degrees of freedom, of creativity, that if you're too tight around, and that's why MBSR is not a therapy, it's not a protocol, it's a way of being. It's a Dharma vehicle, or at least it's been meant to be from the very get-go, a Dharma vehicle. And if you don't know what Dharma means, then, pretty obvious, you better find out if you're going to engage in, delivering a Dharma vehicle. And I use Dharma usually with a small d, because I want to differentiate it from ways in which we articulate that very same Dharma that look a little like it's culturally fixed or historically fixed. It is and it isn't. So, and it's non-dual. And I'll just throw that out, because when we fall into dualisms, well, the best one of all, the favorite one of all is us and them, right? Me and everybody else. And can you feel the toxicity of that? It's okay in a certain way. I mean, you know, if you wound up thinking my hotel room was your hotel room, there would be a problem. Okay? Hey, John, you said we're all one, and, you know, it's like, you know, no. It speaks for itself, doesn't it? So it's like, yes, we understand one, but we also understand not one. And Zen masters love to talk like this, you know, sort of. But what we're really cultivating is a sense of possibility when we respect each other in the deepest of ways, which means also appropriate social boundaries, appropriate somatic boundaries. The amount of transgression in this world is huge. Sexual transgression, traumatic transgressions of all kind, you know. Mindfulness, that kind of clarity, it's like a Manjushri's sword of discrimination. I mean, it's sharp, it cuts through that kind of stuff, and it reminds you that you are not just valuable, but that you are sovereign. And your body space and your body and the way you look and what you love is sovereign and should never be assaulted or threatened in any way. And of course, well, that's a nice fairy tale because it's constantly being threatened. But a lot of the time it's being threatened by us, ourselves, and then we project it out into the world. But what if we actually lived our way into our sovereignty, lived our way into our beauty, lived our way into our autonomy, and lived our way into our interconnectedness so that it wasn't some kind of figment of our imagination or a mere cognitive modeling or story, but it was like underneath the story altogether. It was like in your DNA. And you could tap it in that way. That's like, it's just what I am, who I am, however you want to put it. And it's so underneath thinking that it's not doubtable. And how many of your parents? So, can you see the Buddha nature in your children? Yeah. Sometimes it's hard. I know it is the Buddha, but man, you know. But the harder it is, the more important it is. And that doesn't mean that you're always a certain way. There's no script here for parenting with compassion or mindfulness, and sometimes it's infinitely painful because the family is a reflection of a larger world. And you heard from Joan about her experience with her mother, and you know, it's always that way. I mean, at a certain point, differentiation is important, and also the world is different generation by generation, and nowadays the generations are happening about every 3 years. And you can tell because they listen to different music. And even children separated by 3 years in a family may be listening to very different music. So what is our karmic assignment here? Why do we even have Wisdom 2.0? And what was wrong with Wisdom 1.0? And a lot of it's really skillful. To call it Wisdom 2.0 is really an act of genius. because it needs to be adequate for the moment. And at the moment, I was at the first anti-war demonstration in 1964, in May of 1964, in New York City. The first anti-Vietnam War. If any of you ever even remember or heard of the Vietnam War. Okay. And it was organized by a sophomore at my college, Haverford College, who actually wrote to Bertrand Russell, corralled him to come, and then they developed this anti-war, some march against the war before the Gulf of Tonkin. And I was there in New York City, and it was like, and then, of course, some of you may be old enough to remember what happened on the campuses during the Vietnam War. Columbia, Harvard, MIT. We shut down MIT for an entire day to talk about MIT's role in sort of nuclear arms and missile development and all of the smart weapons. I know the people who designed the first couple of generations of them. They were what's called the Instrumentation Lab, which was at that time part of MIT. They spun it off. But that smart meaning you could put the atom bomb or any bomb you want right down the chimney in Iraq or anywhere else that you want to put it. Okay? Those bombs are falling on Gaza right now. Only multiple generations later. Smarter than ever. They're so smart, they're killing people by the thousands who just happen to have the misfortune of living in Gaza and being at the mercy of mercenaries of one kind or another who don't care about that because there's some other agenda that comes out of the deep, 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 deep wounding that was not their doing. And at the same time, you've got the Israelis with their world. And you've got the Ukrainians and the Russians. And they're like families. They're all the same. They're family. I have friends in Ukraine, and they're Russian relatives, It's like they speak the same language. And all of a sudden, a few minds get together that have lots of money and have figured out how to take millions of people and keep them in a certain kind of servitude, and I use that word, advisedly, given that it's Russia. And they can do whatever the hell they want. And just take 20-somethings, and when you run out of 20-somethings, you take prisoners and you throw them into cannons, fodder. For what? World War II was the war to end all wars. Till Korea. There was a time that I worked with the military that got very interested in mindfulness, and I visited the front lines and the generals in Korea and 30, 40 years, 50 years after, the Korean War, they're still there with all the armaments facing each other down, and, it's scary on the other side. So I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but what a waste. The poor people of North Korea. This is the human condition. It's like we could go on, whether it's, Mozambique or whether it's, we need to govern ourselves in a new way. We need to learn how to govern ourselves on Spaceship Earth. Because, the spaceship has only one oxygen supply. If you take an apple, and let's say the apple is the Earth, the skin of the apple is in proportion the size of the atmosphere to the Earth. So the atmosphere is as thin as the skin of the apple in relationship to the size of the Earth. It's a membrane. So take a notice, because I don't have to invite you to take a breath, but notice the next breath you take. and it's free, right? And we're only one breath away in any moment from being out of here. And we have this thin membrane that not only gives us life and all life on Earth life, but it also protects us from, radiation until we create ozone holes and stuff like that. But still, we haven't completely damaged the atmosphere. They call Mars, they call the Earth a blue planet. Astronomers do, and then space engineers, and they call Mars a red planet. And they call Venus a dead planet. So we're right in between. I know Elon Musk is dying to get to Mars. But we need to take care of the home planet. Because only the billionaires would get to Mars, and it wouldn't be too pleasant anyway. Let's take care of this planet, because we can turn it into Venus. If the, sort of global warming reaches a certain point, it's irreversible. It goes chaotic, and then, it's very hard to pull it back. And the CO2 level could just kind of gallop away, and Venus is 800 degrees at the surface of Venus. As far as we know, and now we've found planets everywhere in the universe. It turns out that almost every star has a solar system. This is all recent stuff. And some of the planets are like big Saturn-type, Jupiter-type gaseous planets, but some of them are small rocky planets. And the technology is good enough so that they can actually detect these rocky planets, and the next generation of technology is going to be able to discern whether there are conditions on those planets that might be conducive to life, like water, for instance, or oxygen, But for all that, the gazillions of planets and solar systems in the universe, we're the only one that we can be certain of has life. And you could say that the universe, after 13.8 billion years of evolution, has resulted in us on planet Earth. And it's like a karmic experiment. I won't even say a karmic assignment. But it's a karmic experiment. Let's see if they can make it to 10,000 years since the Industrial Revolution. Native cultures have been on planet Earth for stretches of time close to tens of thousands of years, or 5,000 or 6,000 years, in South America, Asia, in all sorts of places, in North America. The native cultures knew how to be in wise relationship with nature. We feel like we're separate from nature and we are going to dominate nature. Hubris. And it's got a cost. It's got a cost. So what would the answer to this be? More corporate capitalism? Really? What is the story we need to tell ourselves now? Or do we need to actually transcend story and discover something even more powerful than story? And one of the questions that I want to ask Yuval Noah Harari, if I ever get an opportunity, is, okay, Yuval, you have a fairly intensive meditation practice, and you've had it for at least 20 years, in the Goenka Vipassana tradition. Why? How come? That's all about transcending story. Understanding I, me, and mine. in all the Buddhist traditions, I mean, the vocabulary is a liberative vocabulary. It's about liberation from greed, hatred, delusion, suffering. It's all out there. The whole prescription and the sort of diagnosis, etiology, prognosis, and treatment plan, the Four Noble Truths. It's all out there. It's been out there for 2,600 years and counting. And we're in a renaissance. I think we have the potential to catalyze a global renaissance on planet Earth. And it's not going to happen by building more smart bombs or missiles or warheads or amphibious battalions with clever new tactics. It may require us to give up certain elements of security that we feel like we strongly identify with. I don't know what they are. But, sometimes I think, well, what would be called for? Gandhi took down the British Empire, or at least liberated their biggest grab. And they did it by non-violently. I mean, that didn't mean there wasn't a huge amount of violence, but they took an orthogonal approach to that kind of power, and they won. And then, of course, that wasn't the end of the story, and they bifurcated, and and they're still dealing with the sort of, Hindus versus Muslims, and this tremendous othering of all kinds. And yet it's a democracy, and everything's in process, and we don't know how the whole thing will go. But maybe, just maybe, we need to either come up with a new story that we can all agree, yes, this is the way we need to move on planet Earth. And maybe it's to really tax billionaires at the level that they used to tax them in the 1950s. 1950s. I think it was at 90%. Okay? And then get rid of all the loopholes that allow them to sort of scoot out from under the table and not pay taxes. I mean, if we're one family or one organism, then we need to redistribute the blood supply enough so that every cell is metabolically whole and can do its work. And what is that work? Don't know. But we'll find out by living our way into it, by practicing, by cultivating moment-to-moment, non-reactive, non-judgmental awareness that's not mine, or I, me, or mine. The Buddha's famous for having said that his entire 40 years of teaching could be collapsed into one sentence, and I like to say, on the off chance that he wasn't kidding around, maybe we should memorize that sentence. And the sentence is, nothing is to be clung to as I, me, or mine. Easy to say until you get in my fucking way.
Can you say it again?
Until you get in my fucking way. Okay, nothing is to be clung to. The operative verb is to cling. Okay, and this is, in that Four Noble Truths, the source of the suffering, the origin of suffering, clinging, self-identification. I, me, and mine. Nothing is to be clung to as I, me, and mine. So, of course, that's an ideal, but maybe mindfulness of how much we cling to I, me, and mine. How much we do. And then it's a short jump to us versus them. Very short jump. And then we better get them before they get us, and we dehumanize them because they're Muslims or because they're Hindus or because they're Jews or because they're Palestinians or whatever you, Trumpists, yep. And you know, we're off to the races, racing to Armageddon. Or just, and that may not be the end of the story, we can turn the world into a radioactive world. We can kill 100 million people, somebody's going to survive, and they will rebuild, and they may have 6 arms, or I don't know what, but if we have any caring for our children and grandchildren and their children and grandchildren, maybe we should wake up now. And if I knew anything other than mindfulness, and when I use the word mindfulness, by the way, if you're not hearing the word heartfulness, you're not understanding what I'm saying, okay? So in my words, and in the Buddhist tradition, they often say, 2 wings, 1 bird. So mindfulness, compassion. But it's the 1 bird part that I want to emphasize, okay? And in the Chinese, it's like the calligraphy for now. It looks like a hat over the 4 chambers of the heart. Now heart. Mindfulness. Yin. So I would just venture to throw out that maybe this is our karmic assignment for humanity on Spaceship Earth. And none of us know how to thread this needle. And there may be not one way to thread the needle. In fact, what I was saying about MBSR and the kind of way I hoped it would unfold so that it's a participatory kind of thing that everybody's going to, in some sense, keep the form, but at the same time bring the formless into it so that, you know, it's a transmission of love and wisdom. And it's embodied in the form of you. But if you think you're wise, then you're really screwed. And I don't know how else to put it, but maybe, just maybe, it's possible for us to instantiate some kind of orthogonal rotation in consciousness. And by that, what I mean that's a $10 word that I used originally when I was a student at MIT because they like those kinds of $10 words. Orthogonal means that it's at right angles to the phase space that you're talking about. So it's like a hidden dimension that we rotate in consciousness, and everything is the same as it was before, except nothing's the same because we've undergone the rotation. Okay? It's like, so seeing what hasn't been seen before. Everything's exactly the same, only you're not. That's liberation. Okay? But that may be a momentary liberation. Now we have to, like, you know, sometimes we like to joke and ask people, well, on retreat, well, did you wake up on an in-breath or did you wake up on an out-breath? Don't know. But it would be at that high level of resolution in a certain way that, you know what toxic thoughts are in your mind. You know how much othering you do. You know how much you benefit from certain kinds of injustices. And then that knowing in some way or other gets healed. It is enacted in some way or other where we find levels of generosity or levels of participation or levels of non-control or stepping back rather than stepping forward and always being the one center stage, especially if you look like me, and the grayer the hair, the better. And just find out, give space for everybody's genius. And everybody's be seen and met and actually resourced to the point where we say, all right, this bullshit just has to stop. Has to stop. It was supposed to stop at World War II, then it was supposed to be the Korean War, then it was the Vietnam War, then it was the Iraq, or the Gulf War, then it was the Iraq. And who's making out like bandits with all of this? Hey, if you really, Do you remember that movie that Dustin Hoffman was in called The Graduate, and where some corporate type says to him, takes him aside at a pool party and says, plastics. Plastics. Just go into plastics. Now we're all suffering from microplastic poisoning in the body. The guy had it right. Plastics. You make a fortune in plastics. And now downstream, there's like seas, islands, gigantic islands of plastic floating around in the Pacific Ocean. And they're in all of our cells, all of our bodies. And those PFABs and everything else. It's in all sorts of products, including even dental floss. You know, you're flossing your teeth and you're poisoning yourself, unless you're paying attention. Or you like that kind of dental floss because it's the only one that works in your teeth. So you have to, you know, it's all a kind of titrating how much you can, you know, change. But I'm optimistic, I have to tell you. It says here, this is the first time I've even looked at this thing. It says, please wrap up. Thank you. Oh, you should put it up on the big screen. Can you do that? So, please, can you give us the please wrap up on the big screen there? I want everybody to see it, because this is really wonderful. Come on. So, and I sympathize. Okay, so. So let's take a moment and drop in and let go of everything that's been said. Okay, that doesn't mean it won't resonate with you, it won't continue to resonate you, but don't feed it. Okay, just drop into the breath, into the body sitting here, into this moment, which is the end of a very long day and a very long conference, most of which I was not here for. Wrap it up, man. So, and just remember or feel your way into your wholeness right now. WHOLENESS. Underneath all your ideas about how inadequate you may be, or how much you have to grow or learn or meditate or go on retreat, just drop all of that and drop into your wholeness now and let it be good enough for now. And rest in awareness. And feeling whatever is here to be felt. Sensing whatever is here to be sensed. Knowing whatever is here to be known. And dropping underneath and inside and in between all of my words to a silence that's never not been here. And now let's affirm that we will go out with this. Okay, that we will carry this with us. So that this is not a one-shot deal or just a nice week of Wisdom 2.0, but that we become the wisdom. We live our way into it. And we don't idealize it or make it about me and my wisdom. I want to say that I feel really understood by all of you. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I feel like I need to give you a certain kind of feedback about either my level of delusion or how fucking sensitive I am. But I feel like you're understanding me. And I feel like that's really important. And every one of you may be hearing, and sure, will be hearing what I'm saying differently. And that's perfect. Because we're in this together, and your karmic assignment has to be your karmic assignment, your unique karmic assignment due to all the causes and conditions that led you to the seat that you're sitting in right now. So I want to just say that I feel tremendously honored by your according me your attention, and that I hope you understand that everything that I've said has been a meditation, and that we've been meditating together underneath thinking, but using concepts and emotion to actually understand the non-dual nature of things and the huge potential of wisdom and compassion to enact healing and transformation in the world. And I'll see you around.